G'day everyone, Matt here, and in this video I'd like to introduce to you Arturia's Memory V, a faithful software recreation of one of the most coveted polyphonic analog synthesizers ever made. In this tutorial, we'll explore what makes it special, walk through its core features, and dive into creative techniques to get the most out of it, whether you're working in the DAW or performing live. Let's get started. Memory V is a powerful virtual instrument built on Arturia's TAE, True Analog Emulation technology, recreating the iconic Memory Moog, the final flagship polyphonic synthesizer produced by Moog Music, released between 1982 and 1985. Unlike many of the era's defining synths, the Memory Moog never became synonymous with a single genre. Instead, it became a cult instrument, revered among collectors and sound designers for its raw, analog complexity, massive harmonic depth, and uncompromising character. You can hear its DNA in the work of artists like Jan Hammer, Jeff Downes, and John Lord. The original hardware is rare, notoriously unstable, and requires constant maintenance. Memory V brings that legendary sound into the modern DAW environment, with total recall, expanded polyphony, and deep modulation tools that the hardware never had. Before we dive into the details, let's hear what it can do. Memory V gives you 3 voltage-controlled oscillators per voice. That's up to 18 oscillators running simultaneously in full polyphony. This stacked architecture is the foundation of that massive, dense front-of-mix sound. Each oscillator offers 3 classic waveforms: triangle, sawtooth, and pulse, and they can be combined within a single oscillator for richer harmonic content. Use the octave selector to position each oscillator across the frequency range, and the pitch control on oscillators 2 and 3 to fine-tune intervals. The pulse width parameter controls the symmetry of the pulse waveform. Narrow settings give you a thin, nasal edge, and wider settings fill out into rounder, more vintage tones. Modulating it over time brings in harmonic movement without touching pitch. When you're ready to push even further, sync and FM open up a completely different sonic territory. Hard sync locks one oscillator cycle to another, forcing it to restart with the master oscillator. As you raise the pitch of the synced oscillator, new harmonic overtones emerge while the fundamental stays fixed. The result is aggressive, edge-rich lead tones. FM, or frequency modulation via oscillator 3, runs at audio rate, modulating the pitch or pulse width of the other oscillators. Combined with sync, it can create harmonically dense, musically useful timbres. Without it, you're in experimental territory. Raw, unstable textures that reward exploration. The noise generator adds a layer of pink noise into the signal path before the filter, perfect for percussive attack transients, synthetic textures, or thickening pad sweeps. Use the mixer to blend it in at whatever level serves the sound. Before the signal reaches the filter, the mixer lets you set the relative level of each oscillator and the noise source. This is where you shape the raw harmonic balance, or blend the three oscillators for density, or even isolate one for a cleaner and more focused tone. Small differences in oscillator balance can dramatically shift the character of a patch. A stronger oscillator 2 adds mid-range body, or pulling back oscillator 1 and pushing oscillator 3 can shift the tonal center entirely. The heart of the memory Moog sound is its ladder filter, a design Moog became famous for, known for its smooth musical roll-off and rich low-end retention. Memory V models this faithfully with the option to switch between the classic 24 dB slope and a more open 12 dB mode. Cutoff controls the tonal brightness of the signal, while emphasis, or resonance, shapes the filter's character, adding focus and intensity around the cutoff frequency. At high emphasis settings, the low end can thin out. The emphasis base compensation switch preserves it, keeping the bottom end intact even when the filter is pushed hard. Keyboard tracking connects the filter cutoff to your MIDI note pitch, so the filter opens as you play higher. At full tracking, it follows a 1:1 ratio, useful for keeping harmonic balance consistent across the keyboard. A dedicated ADSR envelope shapes how the filter moves over time. A short decay with moderate emphasis creates that punchy, characteristic Moog attack, instantly recognizable on leads and basses. Longer attack and decay settings produce smooth, evolving sweeps perfect for pads and cinematic textures. The envelope and mount control sets how far the filter opens in response to the envelope. Combined with emphasis and a fast attack, you can dial in that classic acid-style filter snap, or back it off for a softer, more gradual opening. The amplifier envelope shapes the overall volume of each note, defining how it rises, sustains, and fades. A long attack with generous release creates lush, swelling pads, but a fast attack and short decay gives you percussive stabs. Each voice in Memory V has its own level, pan, and drive control. Drive applies saturation individually per note, not as a master effect, which means chords stay clear and musical even as you push the character. A little drive adds harmonic richness. Past halfway, it brings in the raw, crunchy grit that the original Memory Moog was known for. The dedicated LFO can modulate oscillator pitch, pulse width, filter cutoff, and more. Choose from triangle, sawtooth, ramp, or sample and hold waveforms, anything from smooth vibrato to stepped, random movement. The LFO runs globally by default, affecting all voices equally. Enabling retrig gives each voice its own independent LFO phase, turning it into a true polyphonic modulator, where each note in a chord moves differently. mod wheel is hardwired to the LFO mount, giving you real-time control over modulation depth during performance, just like the original hardware. Use it for expressive vibrato on leads or gradual filter animation on pads. Oscillator 3 serves a dual role in Memory V. In the standard signal path, it functions as an audio oscillator, but in the voice modulation section, it can also act as a modulation source, routing oscillator 1 pitch, oscillator 2 pitch, pulse width, filter cutoff, and panning. At normal range, oscillator 3 runs at audio rate, creating FM-style timbral complexity. Enable the low switch and disable keyboard control, and it becomes an independent LFO, untracked to keyboard pitch and free running across all voices. The filter envelope can also modulate via this section, either as a direct modulator to pitch or pulse width, or as an amount control for oscillator 3 modulation. This lets the envelope shape not just the filter opening, but the FM depth itself, creating sounds that dynamically evolve through their decay phase. Memory V's polyphony modes range from mono and legato through to poly 6 and poly 12, the latter being an Arturia expansion beyond the original hardware's 6-voice limit. A 6-voice mode is available to stay closer to the authentic experience, but 12-voice opens up richer chord voicings and denser textures. The voice allocation modes, reassign, rotate, reset, and reset memory, define how notes are assigned to voices when you play. Reset memory, in particular, is essential for recreating the behavior of the original memory Moog presets, where repeated notes tend to reuse their previously assigned voice. Glide creates smooth pitch transitions between notes, a key element of any expressive mono lead. Set the instrument to mono with moderate glide time for those characteristic sliding lines. Enable legato, and glide only triggers when you play notes connected, giving you full control over when the slide happens. In polyphonic modes, cranking up glide time and adding generous reverb creates something entirely different. Haunting, cinematic slides between chords, perfect for film scoring or atmospheric production. Unison stacks multiple voices on a single note, detuning them and spreading them across the stereo field. Increasing voice count and detune progressively thickens the sound, from a subtle widening shimmer to a massive, swarm-like wall of oscillators. For a classic respace, use a sawtooth waveform with higher voice count and moderate to high detune. Shape the low end with the ladder filter and add a touch of drive for that heavy, rolling character. A Hoover sound follows a similar path. Layer oscillators across octaves, engage Unison with a high detune, and add a little glide for that iconic upward sweep. The vintage section adds controlled analog imperfection to the instrument. Each parameter like pitch, pulse width, level, cutoff, resonance, modulation, and envelope introduces subtle per-voice variation, recreating the natural drift and inconsistency of analog hardware. The global vintage knob scales all of these simultaneously. A small amount adds life and movement to static sounds, or push it higher and the instrument starts to feel aged and unstable, like a well-worn piece of hardware straight out of a recording session. global section provides overall transpose, fine-tune, which is adjustable from 400 to 480 Hz, and main volume, applied at the end of the signal chain after the effects. This is different from per voice level, which sits before the effects and shapes how each note is individually processed. The multi-arp is one of Memory V's most expressive features. It combines 4 independent arpeggiators running simultaneously, each with its own arp module, rhythm module, and note module, enabling interlocking melodic patterns, polymetric grooves, and complex evolving sequences that go far beyond a standard arpeggiator. Global settings control rate, gate, and scale across 4 arpeggiators. Each lane can be individually enabled, muted, or soloed, and this visualizer displays the generated note patterns in real time. The FX section provides 4 slots of studio-quality effects, fully chainable and reorderable via drag and drop. Spatial effects like reverb and delay add dimension and placement. Modulation effects like chorus, phaser, and flanger bring movement and width. Compressor and multiband give you dynamic shaping, and distortion or bit crusher push the character into more aggressive territory. The advanced panel's modulation system extends well beyond the main panel's LFO and voice modulation. Up to 3 modulator slots are available, each accepting an ADSR envelope, function generator, random source, voice modulator, or mod sequencer. Routing is entirely drag and drop. Grab the miniscope of any modulator and drag it onto a parameter to create an assignment. Color-coded modulation rings make it easy to see which modulator is affecting what at a glance. The function generator is a full multi-segment envelope editor. Draw any shape from smooth swells to sharp rhythmic spikes with up to 64 points per curve. The mod sequencer brings stepped, patterned modulation, perfect for adding the signature rhythmic flavor of the classic analog sequences. Random generates unpredictable variation, controllable in range and smoothness. The voice modulator assigns unique per-voice values, allowing you to shape level, pan, or any other parameter differently for every note in a chord, creating organic, polyphonically animated textures. Macros tie everything together for performance. Each macro knob controls multiple parameters simultaneously, with individual modulation amounts, curve shapes, and range offsets per destination. Assign a macro to filter cutoff, drive, and reverb wet together, and a single knob becomes a complete transformation of the sound. Map macros to your MIDI controller for live control or automate them in the DAW. Arturia hardware controllers map automatically. This is where the studio workflow and the live stage meet. And that was our deep dive into Memory V. This is an instrument with enormous depth, and the best way to discover it is to try it for yourself. Be sure to check out our other Memory V tutorials for more techniques and explore the 300+ factory presets as starting points for your own sounds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.